Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I'm going to kick us off with some introductions and housekeeping items. Today's topic will be taking a deeper dive into the Medicaid Buy-in program for working people with disabilities. We want to remind everyone that you are muted and chat is disabled just to limit any background noise. We do have hundreds of individuals participating in today's webinar. Please use the Q&A for any sort of questions that you may have. We'll be collecting those throughout today's presentation, and we'll reserve some time at the end to go through those questions. We have enabled closed captioning, so if you'd like to view that, please turn that on your end, on your desktop or mobile device. And Nina is going to drop a link to the materials into the chat, so you can take some time to download those now as we're going through some of these introductions. An email will also go out 24 hours after today's workshop with a link to those materials. And about a week following today's training, you'll be able to access a recording of this session on our website at NYSARCtrustservices.org/webinars. You'll also receive a survey link promptly following the training. We ask that you please take a couple minutes to fill that out and provide us with some feedback on today's session. We just want to remind everyone that the information in today's webinar is for educational purposes. If you're watching this recording down the road, some of this information may be subject to change. As we know, Medicaid eligibility rules are changing year over year. And we do want to make sure that everyone's aware that these the views of our speaker and this workshop do not constitute an endorsement of services. I do usually save this for the end, but I want to make sure I give our guest speaker the most time today. So just a reminder that we have our next webinar on July 20th from 11 to noon, and we'll be talking about special needs trusts and ABLE accounts. We'll be talking about the key advantages of each of those programs, and we'll also discuss some of those differences. So really taking a deep dive into that topic, and we hope you can join us. All right. So I'm delighted to welcome our guest speaker today, Greg Otten. Greg, thank you so much for being here. Greg is a healthcare advocate for the Center for Independence of the Disabled. He advocates for consumers through the Community Health Advocates Ombudsman Program and the Independent Consumer Advocacy Network, which is ICAN for any of you that are not familiar with that acronym. And he's going to take some time and share a little bit of information about that program with us as well today. And this program helps consumers the navigation of their health plans that cover long-term care services. Greg also previously worked as an advocate and assisted clients with all manners of insurance coverages and HIV-specific benefits. He's joining us today to help share more information about the Medicaid Buy-in program for working people with disabilities, which allows people with disabilities who are working to earn more money and still maintain Medicaid services that are often vital to their ability to live independently in the community and work within that community. We'll also talk about how to protect a person's financial eligibility if their income or assets are still above the financial limits, even for the Medicaid Buy-in program. So thank you, Greg. We really appreciate you being here and sharing your expertise with us. I'm going to stop my screen share and allow you to take over.
All right. Are you getting my screen there?
Yep, looks great.
All right. Well, I am Greg Otten at CIDNY, as we call ourselves. That's our acronym. I am honored to be asked to present here. I've known NYSARC for decades and really appreciate the work you do helping our clients be eligible for the benefits they so much need. So thank you for that. Let's see here. Okay. We're good on screen share here? Oh, slideshow. Or am I in slideshow? Okay. So I'm going to first say a few words about an ombuds program for people who have Medicaid or are eligible for Medicaid in order to get long-term care services. And that is, as Sarah mentioned, called ICAN, or Independent Consumer Advocacy Network. We're the New York State Ombuds program for people with Medicaid who need long-term care and behavioral health services. We assist New Yorkers with understanding how to enroll in managed care plans that cover long-term care and behavioral health services. We help answer your questions about managed care plans, give you advice about your plan options, help you enroll in a managed care plan, solve problems with these plans, which can certainly come up, help you understand your rights and responsibilities, file complaints and grievances, and One of our biggest business items is helping people appeal, such as when a plan wants to reduce somebody's hours of home care or denies an increase. That is very common issue to see. We help anyone enrolled in a Medicaid managed care plan who needs these long-term care services that would include home care, adult daycare, including medical model and social model adult daycare, and a limited amount of nursing home. Nursing home used to be totally covered within these plans. Now it is limited to about 3 months or until somebody becomes a long-term resident, at which point it reverts to fee-for-service Medicaid. Behavioral health services through health and recovery plans or HARP plans we help with. And we educate people who are newly eligible for enrollment in a Medicaid managed care plan. We can talk to friends, family members, social workers, providers, anyone who's helping people with their healthcare decisions. Now, alphabet soup. I'm not going to give a training on all of this. Let's suffice it to say there are 2 basic types of plans: partially capitated and fully capitated. These plans are paid a capitation rate, which means they're paid per member per month. So they receive the same amount from Medicaid, whether they give 4 hours a day of home care or 24/7 split shift. So they have a certain incentive to make things a little hard to get hours, if I may say. And that's where we come in. We make sure that they are following the regulations. These plans have to follow the same rules that fee-for-service Medicaid covers, and we are helping make sure that that happens for clients. MLTC, managed long-term care, is partially capitated. That means these cover a subset of services, mostly related to long-term care, but also for medical specialties: podiatry, audiology, optometry, and dental. The rest of these are integrated models that cover all Medicare and Medicaid services within one type of plan. This is our network of agencies, and you'll get these on a slide that you'll receive. We have a hotline, and it is Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And I'm also at the end of this whole presentation going to give you my contact information and the helpline number. We speak various languages, and for any language in the world, we have access to a language line. Services are free. We give educational presentations as well. And we'll meet you in person at our offices or at your home. And finally, we have a sentinel function. If we see a trend, we report that to Department of Health. Such and such plan is routinely reducing people's hours with improper notice, something like that. We would report to Department of Health for them to take further action on. So, oh, good. Here is my number, my email, and the ICAN website for more information. So that's it on ICAN. Now, let's see here. Escape doesn't seem to get me out of this. Sarah or Nina, can you help me out?
I click on the screen, yeah, and then hit escape.
There we go. Okay, so now I am not as fluent on Zoom as I am on certain other things. All right, there we go. I think I got it there.
Looks great.
All right, thank you. Medicaid buy-in for working people with disabilities, the meat of this presentation. Allows people with disabilities to work and access everything that regular Medicaid covers. It's the same program, just different eligibility because someone is doing some consistent work. Most frequently, we see people who have received Social Security disability insurance. That is an automatic disability determination because Medicaid buy-in uses basically the same criteria. But some of the folks we see have never received SSDI and asked Medicaid itself to determine their disability status. Every state has a Medicaid buy-in program. I'm speaking specifically of the New York program today, because that's where we all live and serve clients, and it has rules distinguishable from any other state. Again, disabled as defined by Social Security, meaning unable to perform substantial gainful activity due to a medically determinable impairment that is expected to result in death or last at least 12 months. Now, substantial gainful activity has specific dollar amounts. I believe it's $14.70 a month this year. However, it's a bit paradoxical because the MBI uses that definition, but in this case, you must be doing work, and it can be over the substantial gainful activity amount. So the only way I can wrap my head around this is that they use the same basic evaluation process as Social Security, same basic medical types of impairments, but there has to be some work. So beyond that, can't explain the paradox. There has to be earnings from work. It can't be just seasonal or sporadic employment. It needs to be consistent, but there's no minimum number of hours. It could, in theory, be 1 hour a month. I've never seen one like that, but it can be no minimum. Have to be between the ages of 16 and 64.
Sorry to interrupt there, but we did get a question in the Q&A. I feel like it would be a good time to answer it now. They asked, they are on the buy-in program. They know it ends at 65. Is it on their 65th birthday or
Yes.
the end of that 65th year? Okay.
On the 65th birthday.
On the
Now that may change, and I'll go into that in a second. They may eliminate the upper age limit. Countable net income at or below 250% of the federal poverty guidelines, and I'll go through this in more detail in a little bit. The resource limits are the same now as regular Medicaid. All the income and asset limits have been increased this year for regular Medicaid as well. So the resource limit for Medicaid buy-in was raised up to the same as the regular, because basically they raised it that much. 30,182 for a single, 40,821 for a couple. One specific enhancement to Medicaid buy-in is that retirement accounts like IRAs and 401ks don't count. The underlying value of the asset is not counted. The income from the asset is counted as income. And again, all, as Sarah said earlier, all of these resource and income limits will change each year because the poverty guidelines change each year. Okay, let's see here. I've got to get to a different set of slides here. 1 second. There we go. Do you see that, Sarah?
Yes, we can see that. Maybe if you want to zoom in a little bit just so that we can.
Oh, I'll have to raise the font size.
That works. The bottom right too has a little zoom. You can, that little slider in the bottom right corner.
Hold on, I don't see screen share here. You can't read this?
It's just small.
I'm just not, okay, I'm not gonna worry about it. You'll all get this. Basically, the legislature made some changes to the program that are supposed to kick in on January 1, 2025. CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the feds, have to approve these. And if they are approved, there will no longer be an upper age limit for this program. The resource limit will go to 300,000. The income limit will go to 2,250% of the federal guidelines. This is serious stuff. That's $27,340 a month for a single person. There will be premiums, and they can be hefty. If it's 500% or greater of poverty, the maximum premium is $1,033 a month. That's as high as it can get. So study this, get ready for it, pray for it. Let's hope it happens because it's really going to open up Medicaid to a lot of people. Okay. There we go. Oops. From beginning takes me back to the beginning. Okay, well, that makes sense. So right now it's 16 up to the 65th birthday. Immigration wise, it's the same as regular Medicaid. US citizens, nationals, and immigrants with legal permanent resident status and PUCAL, permanently residing under color of law, are eligible and have to be a New York State resident. Documentation for citizenship or immigration status could be a birth certificate, passport, driver's license, green card, application for adjustment of immigration status. In other words, someone may not totally have a legal status, but they can document that they have applied to USCIS for a status, and the USCIS Immigration Service is not contemplating deportation. That is enough as far as immigration status to get Medicaid. Proof of residency, New York residency, could be a lease, rent, or mortgage receipt, or utility bill. Social Security number or card, or showing that somebody has applied for Social Security, can be submitted. And also any other insurance like Medicare or third-party employer insurance. Proof of that should be submitted because Medicaid is going to look to other insurance first to cover services, and then any balance can be considered by Medicaid. Medicaid is always payer of last resort. So this is the same Medicaid program that we all know.
And that is what one person asked. How does it work if you have a private insurance through your employer as your primary insurance, and then you're using the Medicaid buy-in as your secondary?
Same way as it would work with regular Medicaid. So the employer insurance may cover items that Medicaid doesn't cover, and vice versa. Medicaid may cover long-term home care, for example, is just Medicaid. So they know that the employer insurance is not going to cover it. But there is a code in Medicaid system showing that other insurance. So it's always important that it be billed first so that Medicaid knows that the other insurance considered it and either didn't pay or didn't pay the full amount, and then Medicaid will consider it.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So must have some sort of work earnings at the time of application, and have to be paying any applicable state, local, federal, and payroll taxes, but proof of tax payment is not required with an application. Documentation of employment can be tricky, especially for the self-employed. It could be just like with regular Medicaid, 30 days, like 4 weeks of pay stubs or copies of paychecks. It could be a written statement from the employer, tax returns, W-2s, bank deposit records, anything showing the income. Self-employed is trickier. That can be receipts, canceled checks, but something should indicate the dates worked, hours spent, rate of pay, and amount paid. I've just gotten this from experience doing it and having colleagues do it. I've been told by people at the state that they want to see consistent employment. Frankly, there's a little bit of a bias, in my opinion. This is just my opinion, that some folks at Medicaid think this is a bit shady. They think if people are working, so we want to really dot all the I's and cross all the T's as far as getting this showing consistent work. Now, having said that about consistent work, there's a grace period, which I will get to in a minute. I thought it was next, but it's not. So, disability determination, Social Security, or Commission for the Blind and Visually Handicapped, Railroad Retirement Board, any of those, or doing a full Medicaid disability review application. Very similar process to Social Security disability application, but Medicaid has its own forms. Now, these forms that I'm going to reference here there are links to them. To be honest with you, I know New York City better than I know upstate. In New York City, you would submit MAP 3177, which is a basic, very simple one-page form requesting a disability determination. That one, or the equivalent upstate. If any of you know, feel free to let us know.
Yeah, I can chime in on that. So I know what the 3 forms that New York City used to use is what we still use up here in New York State. I don't know all of the names off the top of my head, LDSS something something, but those are things you'd want to contact your local Department of Social Services and get those forms directly from them to make sure that you're using the appropriate forms within your county.
Right, because MAP is Medical Assistance Program, that's city specific. These 3 are DOH forms, so I believe they're statewide. They don't have to be submitted at the beginning, only that first form, but they can be submitted and they're all eventually going to be required. If they're not submitted right away, they will be requested. And that is DOH 5139, which is a basic questionnaire for the client or social worker or family member, their own version of their condition. Then the doctor forms, medical report for determination of disability, the DOH 5143, that would describe diagnoses, symptoms, medical history, functional limitations. How many hours can somebody sit, walk, stand, squat? Everything that a Social Security disability would, they want to see what you're able to do in the workplace. DOH 5173 is Department of Health's version of a HIPAA release. They would want one for each provider who is submitting records so that they can ask for further information if they want it. And the Medicaid requests 3 additional blank release forms in case they want more additional information from other providers. That's the ask. SSI related budgeting, that's a wonky term, but basically it means less than half of earned income counts. And I'll go over the specifics of how that works in a little bit. They call it SSI related. That just means a budgeting methodology used for the disabled, aged, and blind. 250% of poverty guidelines net countable income after all the SSI related disregards are applied. That specific number this year is $3,038 a month single, $4,109 a month couple. But if most of the income is earned, that could be almost double this amount. On the other hand, if the lion's share of the income is unearned, the income limit is going to be lower because that has a less disregard. And I already went over the resource limits. These are items that are countable as far as income and assets. So I'll let you study that. These are disregards, $20 a month of unearned income, and that's per household, not per individual. So if it's a couple, they get one $20 unearned income disregard. Then you have a whole order of steps to apply for earned income. The first $65 or $85 if there's no unearned income at all. Impairment related work expenses. Expenses to help somebody get to work, to be able to work. And that could include a van, something, a lift into a car, something like that. It could include medical equipment needed at work. It could include the portion of home attendant services that make it possible to work. That's impairment-related work expenses. Social Security has to approve a specific amount for that. That's subtracted off the top also. Self-employment business-related expenses. I think of that as Schedule C on a federal tax return, stuff that's related to business on a Schedule C. Half of the remaining earned income after these deductions. Once that's done, blind work expenses, which don't necessarily have to be impairment related, expenses to help a blind individual be able to work. That could be a service dog, for example. Earned income set aside under a plan to achieve self-support. That's a whole training unto itself. Finally, insurance premiums, Part B premium, could be dental, vision, health insurance through work if there's a portion of the premium the employee has to pay, all of that. Now, one thing I've seen is if normally we think of Part B premium assistance for Medicare savings programs, which have a higher income than regular Medicaid and have no resource limit. But if somebody is in the Medicaid buy-in for working people with disabilities, I've seen them have the Part B premium reimbursed. And basically Medicaid for any kind of insurance will do a cost effectiveness determination. And if they think it's cost effective, in other words, if they're going to pay less for that premium than they would pay if they had to pay all of a person's medical expenses, then it may be reimbursed. Here's an example. Someone who lives alone, receives $1,600 a month in Social Security disability, earns $580 a month in addition from work, and $155 of impairment related work expenses. Something I forgot to mention earlier. If a person is receiving Social Security disability and contemplating a return to work, they're going to want to look at the Social Security work rules, the 9-month trial work period. Then are they working under the substantial gainful activity or over? Because if it's too much over for too long, they may get subject to a continuing disability review. So they want to really consider, am I willing to forego my Social Security disability entirely, or do I want to make sure I'm under those limits so that I can continue to get the benefits of both? So in this case, there's $1,600 of unearned income. Subtract $20 from that, $1,580. The earned income, $580, subtract 65, subtract the IRWIs, impairment related work expenses, that's 362, 360. Divide that by 2, and you only count 180 of the earned income. Total then of the net unearned and earned is 1,760, which is well within the eligibility limit. So you can see, if I had this to do over, I'd use a higher SSD to show how much more somebody can earn or work and get MBI. But this shows you the math.
And this is where someone who was just on basic Medicaid or community Medicaid would be slightly over that income limit and possibly need a spend down, whereas because of the Medicaid buy-in eligibility, they're now not needing to spend down.
Right. Actually, when I looked at this yesterday, I thought, gee, 1,600 is pretty close. The new Medicaid income limit is pretty close to that now. It's like 15, I don't know, 1577 or something, but we did add in the work income. So there we go. All right. Disregarded resources. You've got the 1,500 burial fund. Somebody asked, can I own a co-op? Yes, if it's a primary residence. If it's a second home, that's going to count as a resource. So here are some disregarded assets. When the application is submitted to the Medicaid office, Medicaid within 10 days may send you a notice that certain documents are missing. Oh, I'm sorry. They may send a notice of that, and if a client receives that, they have 10 days to get those in. Final decision with a disability determination should take about 90 days, no more than 90 days.
And Greg, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we may have skipped over slide 8 where you review the application process. Could you just go back to that real quick and let people know how they actually apply for the program? And we did get a question about if your agency assists with applying for Medicaid buy-in.
Very much so, yes. Okay, thank you for pointing out my oversight. There are the same two forms that would be used for non-Magi Medicaid. We have the New York State of Health, which is mostly those who are under 65 and don't have Medicare. They may be within the 2-year wait for Social Security disability, but no Medicare yet. And they can apply online at New York State of Health. Medicaid buy-in, despite the higher income, is non-Magi. It's handled through the Medicaid office. So the same forms are used as for regular Medicaid through the Medicaid office. And that is the Access New York and Access New York Supplement A. Supplement A is the one that documents resources. There is a box for MBI WPD on that. Check it. It's question 1, page 1. And I suggest that you write MBI WPD prominently in capital letters at the top of each page and highlight it, because Medicaid workers may miss it. They're more used to budgeting people of spend down. And we have had many cases misbudgeted and have to go to fair hearing or something to get it done correctly. Okay. People with disabilities are entitled to reasonable accommodations in the application process. That could include materials in alternative formats, sign language interpreter, anything you might consider to be a reasonable accommodation. And HRA in New York City has an accommodations office actually for that sort of thing. As with any Medicaid, if there's a denial, there's a fair hearing right within 60 days. And if somebody is denied on recertification, the aid continuing rules apply. Ask for aid continuing within 10 days. Everything continues as is until the hearing decision. So that's a good thing. Now, I alluded earlier to a grace period. Up to 6 months in any 12-month period. And that's when there is a job loss due to no fault of the consumer. It could be a change in medical condition that temporarily doesn't allow him or her to work, or it could be a layoff or termination. What it can't be is somebody just voluntarily resigning. So if it's an allowed thing, then there is a grace period request form that is submitted to the office. The same managed care rules apply to the Medicaid buy-in as to regular Medicaid. Those who have Medicaid and don't have other insurance usually have to join a managed care plan. There are some limited exceptions to that, but usually they have to. People with other insurance, including Medicare, do not join managed care usually. There are some hybrid plans that cover Medicare and Medicaid benefits, but they're not required. There's an exception that I've never seen in the real world, but remember I spoke earlier about managed long-term care for home care services. Most dual eligibles, Medicare plus Medicaid, who need long-term care services must join a managed long-term care plan. However, if they're on MBI WPD and meet nursing home level of care, they're exempt. They don't have to join MLTC, but they may. But they can also stay with straight Medicaid. Never saw it in the real world, but I've certainly seen it on the list of exemptions, so it's worth mentioning. They call it Medicaid buy-in. Well, so far that's a misnomer. There are no premiums. They never implemented them. Originally, they were going to be $25 a month for those between 150 and 250%. No premium for under 150. Now, the changes that are supposed to take effect in 2025 will have premiums. And since the income limits are much higher, my guess is they will be implemented at that point. As with regular Medicaid, it's possible to get 3 months of retroactive coverage at time of application if someone would have been eligible for Medicaid during that period. And if there are medical bills, they can be submitted and reimbursed during that period. Spend down, I'm assuming most of you probably know all about that because that's why NYSARC is one of the reasons NYSARC is around to help us. But basically, if income is higher than Medicaid limits, then the difference can be spent down. So I give an example of $100 over the limit, $100 spend down. Ways to meet that are paid and unpaid bills, convert to Medicaid buy-in, which is what we're talking about. Have a pooled trust like NYSARC, or if they're in a managed long-term care, it's a different, they pay the spend down directly to the MLTC. And the reason for that is you don't want home care cycling on and off, depending on whether Medicaid got your stuff. So they basically activate you for 6 months at a time, and the spend down is between you and the plan. Yes, it is possible to use a pooled trust to get Medicaid buy-in, and the trust only has to go down to the Medicaid buy-in level, not to the regular Medicaid level. I have a client who's done that for years. We have 1619B and well, spend down I talked about. Okay, 1619B. So say somebody had SSI, which is limited income and resources below 2,000. Then the person on SSI starts earning money, which using the SSI related budgeting methodology I discussed, it zeroes out their SSI. In New York, somebody can automatically have up to $52,286 before they lose Medicaid, as long as they're eligible for SSI in every other way, including resources less than 2,000. Well, if somebody goes to work, maybe their resources are going to accumulate. So there's a process to get the case converted to MBI WPD, and that's why I mentioned that. Disability criteria I already discussed, and I think I am open to questions at this point.
Awesome. I'm glad we could get through everything. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope everyone has a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you so much. Good being with you all. Bye-bye.